everybody. Welcome back to our home libraries. For today's episode, we're going to be discussing Lore by Alexandra Bracken. And no, I have not taken the Target sticker off of mine. This is a young adult book, has some obvious Greek mythology inspiration. I mean, the cover is basically Medusa. You all know that we need our Greek mythology fix.
Heck yeah,
and we will be ruining this book for you. So if this is something that you're interested in reading and you don't want it to be spoiled, be sure you stop listening before we get into the questions. But please do come back, give it a listen. Once you have read, head over to our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel, check out some additional content. We did just wrap up Mystery March, so there's a couple extra videos on our YouTube channel if you're interested in that. All of our social media is our home libraries, plural, because we're two people.
We are, and I feel like this is a really good book to follow up Mystery March with because there are elements of mystery in it, like things we don't know and what we're trying to figure out. And
yeah, I would agree with that.
It's not a mystery, but there's a lot of question marks in this book, which makes it really fun.
There are definitely lots of question marks for sure.
So, to summarize this book follows our main character, Melora. She goes by Lore. She is the last member of the Perseids, an ancient family descendant from the Greek god hero Perseus, who beheaded Medusa.
Yep.
So she is the last remaining member of her family. There's 9 ancient Greek families. 4 of them have already been wiped out in this culture that they call, I guess, the Agon, where...
I don't know if you pronounce it Agon, the English language.
It's hard. But essentially what this is a god hunt. So for 7 days, every 7 years, Zeus has punished the ancient gods by turning them mortal for these 7 days, every 7 years. And if that god is killed during these 7 days as a mortal, their power goes to the one that killed them.
Yep.
Zeus did this because of the crimes that these gods committed against humanity, but who's Zeus to really
we'll talk more about
this?
That
but
questions for sure.
Whatever. But a bunch of these gods have been murdered and their power has been brought to a new person. The last of the original ancient gods we have is Athena, Artemis, Hermes, and we don't know about Apollo yet.
Yeah, he's a big question mark at the beginning of the story.
The issue at hand is that Wrath, who is the new Ares, so this person killed Ares and became the god Ares, reincarnated, has dubbed himself Wrath, and he is the big bad. He is trying to wipe out every single god because he's kind of a bag of you-know-whats. And he's killing everyone. He doesn't care about it. Athena wants to kill all the new gods, the ones that have wiped out her siblings. Yeah. So she teams up with Lore to try to kill Wrath. The reason that they team up is because Lore thinks that Wrath is the one that had wiped out her entire family. So both of them are out for revenge. They want to kill this imposter god. And there's a lot more that happens.
That's probably the longest summary we've ever had because this book just has a lot in it. There's just a lot of stuff in this book. A lot happens in it's just a week, you know.
I know. It's action-packed. It's a lot. That was a lengthy summary. And I'm not even sure I did that great of a job summarizing it, but pretty much just read it.
Yeah. Hopefully you can get the gist of it as we go through the questions if you're the kind of person who just wants to hear our review and our discussion. You don't really care to read it.
I feel like this one might be confusing.
Into some more of the detailed stuff. Yeah. We'll do our best. We're gonna give it a go. It's very fantasy. I mean, I wouldn't even say there's a whole lot of world building because it does happen in our world, but there's just a lot of, I don't know. It's just a lot of stuff is the best way that I can describe it. A lot of stuff packed into this single book.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I loved it. I rated it very high.
Yeah, I gave it 5 out of 5.
I did too.
Honestly, I would give this a 7 out of 5.
This
is my second time reading this, and I was still, like, the mixture of fantasy and mythology is just so good. I mean, there were characters that I didn't really care about, but I feel like the Greek inspiration, the inspiration from mythology really is what got me into this book.
Yeah, and then I really like, so the God Hunt, it changes cities every 7 years, and this particular hunt takes place in New York City, and I thought that the city itself played a really cool element in the book.
Yeah, and you kind of grew up in New York State, so, you know, you have some familiarity.
Any of my
more
friends
familiarity
from
with
Rochester.
me. I have visited as a tourist once in my life, you know, and I was 10 when it happened.
Yeah,
so
well, I think
I think that putting it in New York is definitely a good call for an author whose main audience is American.
Yeah.
If she had put it somewhere like in Europe, we would all kind of be like, okay, cool.
So let's get into these questions. It's going to be really fun because Carrie made all these questions.
I did. They all came from this noggin right here. Proud of myself.
So.
Don't expect it to stay this way. So we can start with the questions that kind of deal with the mythology inspiration of this story. How did you feel about some of the portrayals of the gods that we encountered in this book? And the biggest one we spend a lot of time with is Athena. What do you think about Athena?
I think that it follows the typical literature that we've all come to know. The main characteristics of these gods are put on display. And then what's really cool is that when we see the god reincarnated, you see the similar traits and threads of the ancient gods, but then the person that killed them, their characteristics start coming through. So it was a really neat way to tie it together.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason that when a member of this culture does kill one of the gods and takes on their power, they're kind of expected to come up with a new name for themselves, because they're not really their mortal self anymore, but they're also not
the original,
the god. It's like a combination of these things, which, you know, also kind of brings in Wrath being the new Ares, and kind of like my curiosity. We don't really know anything about this from the book, but I wonder if his personality before he became a new god, he was a very vengeful person. He was just a bad guy in general when he was mortal. I wonder if that kind of informed his decision to kill Ares, or if the fact that he did kill Ares really brought his kind of evil, like vindictive and like mastermindy type qualities out, you know?
Yeah, and there is something to be said, though, about this whole culture, because this is generation after generation after generation instilled in this. So a lot of these, like, values are really put into these children. They're brought up in this life. And so the big part was that Lore had gotten out for a little bit. Her family was murdered, and she somehow escaped for a little bit and did not participate in anything with it, but it pulls you back in because it's part of like the fabric of all of these humans.
It's an interesting juxtaposition because we see that Laura so badly wants to be away from this. We're kind of getting off of the question, but trying to follow the conversation. She wants so badly to not participate in the Aegon that it's kind of inevitable that she is made to participate in a way. I don't really think of her as like a willing participant. She's not participating with the goal of killing a god like many are, but yeah, I think that just the fact that she doesn't want to do it that much means that she has to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
I would agree.
There hasn't been a cycle since her family died.
Right. So for her to be out during kind of the off part of the cycle.
Doesn't say much.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and then the cycle comes back around and draws her back in its various ways. But anyway, back to our question about the gods. We also get a little bit of a glimpse of Artemis. And she was going through it. She seemed cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, like legit crazy, and I do not use that word lightly. She was just like so angry.
Yeah.
And that anger was, I don't know, it was doing something to her brain.
Yeah, like the last thread that she had snapped.
Yeah. Something else kind of interesting, because Artemis is thought of as a patron of, I guess, animals in a way, but we really see that come through in dogs in this book. And the way that she was behaving was almost like feral, or like rabies or something. Like something was really
not right
up
in
her brain, for sure. And the only other one we really get a little glimpse of is Apollo. What do you think of Apollo? We get a little glimpse at the end.
What did I think of Apollo?
Yeah, the little tiny flashback that we get. We're not going to spoil it yet. We get a little flashback of Apollo. What did you think from that little chapter we got?
That what we saw of him was the weight of being hunted for this many years. He was just tired.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think that was part of Artemis too. Like, she was just tired. She was done.
But it was kind of...
But the way that it would...
manifesting
differently.
in different ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. His was more...
resigned.
Exhaustion.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be done with this. And hers was more like, I'm going to kill everybody.
Yeah.
But from what I know of Apollo, which arguably is not a lot, he is something to do with health and healing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty interesting that the little glimpse we get of him is a interaction with a young boy who's very sick and likely to die. And we'll get into exactly what that interaction thing is in a different question.
Yeah.
But Zeus. Zeus kind of started this. He started the Agon, whatever, doesn't matter. But apparently a lot of the old gods were upset because humanity was starting to worship gods that were not them. So they were going to punish humanity with plagues, fires, things like that. All kinds of like bad shit. And Zeus was like, protect the humans. You're banished. Is Zeus the good god? Like, how did she turn this into like Zeus being the good god here?
I don't think that it was turned into Zeus being the good god. I feel like Zeus was like the parent that was at his wit's end and didn't know what to do, so he decided to do a punishment. And then never...
A punishment that lasted centuries?
Yeah. And then never like was like, oh, maybe that was too much. Or maybe that wasn't the right decision. Because
he's way too...
Zeus would never admit that.
Way too selfish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Way too egotistical to be like, oh, I was wrong. He would never do that.
And like, in typical Zeus fashion, he gave horrific instructions. So no one knew really what the goal was. Or maybe it just was lost over all the time.
Yeah, the instructions were like a riddle, basically.
Yeah. And then like, we find out that part of the riddle people don't have. So like, how to end this, no one knows because it just wasn't available.
Yeah. It was like hidden or something.
Yeah. Just typical Zeus.
But I mean, maybe he was I think he was kind of portrayed as kind at the very end of the book.
Sure.
We'll talk about why, like, at the end of this discussion.
Okay.
But I don't know. It just seemed like we don't actually see him. We don't actually experience any kind of personality tied to that name. But the way that his actions were described just didn't sit with his portrayal in mythology.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't get to see enough of him, I guess. I'm sure he would have disappointed us more if we did.
He's definitely not a main character in this story.
No.
So.
No.
He's
but our main
vaguely
character,
mentioned.
yeah, our main character though is Lore, as we've talked about, and
Right.
our first like glimpse into her life is her participating in this underground fight club.
Yeah. It's like at a Chinese restaurant or something.
Yeah. And she has to fight someone that's wearing the mask of Achilles, the family that descended from Achilles.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be her old childhood BFF, Castor, who
Yeah.
she thought was dead.
Yeah. He was the sick little boy that was previously mentioned.
Turns out he's not just alive, he is now a god. He is the new Apollo.
Yeah.
Or the false imposter Apollo if you're Athena and she's pissed at him.
Athena would call him that, yeah.
What did we initially make of his inability to remember how he acquired Apollo's power?
So I kind of like initially was trying to rationalize this in my head. I was like, okay, he's a sick kid. He has leukemia. He's literally on his deathbed. So, maybe he was mostly dead already, and Apollo saw that and was like, okay, I'm not going to let this kid die. And just kind of like holds his hand and makes Castor kill him, but Castor is like unconscious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how would he remember something if he was unconscious? Or maybe like Castor's father was so upset that he somehow captured Apollo and got Castor to kill. I don't know. I tried to rationalize it. I tried to figure it out.
Well, and I feel like I felt the same with you. I was trying to like rationalize, figure that out. But then also too, I felt like we could tell that he was holding back and that he remembered a little bit more than he was telling us. Not that he remembered
I don't know if he
everything.
did. I mean, we don't know that he knows everything until the end. And he kind of blames it on a different scenario that was also happening at the same time. But I kind of did feel like he had no clue. I mean, it was to the point where he was going to chase after Artemis to be like, Artemis, did you see what happened? Because I don't know. And Artemis was obviously trying to kill him. So it was like a suicide mission for him to chase after her. And I think that if he'd had any kind of inkling about what happened, he would not have done that.
Yeah.
He would have cared. I don't know. It's kind of tough, that one.
It was a weird situation.
For sure. For him to just no memory whatsoever of something that seems kind of significant. I mean, like killing a god in this case is
right. It's a huge deal. But also, too, I think that because we didn't get to, like, see or know Apollo ahead of it, we didn't understand, like, his motives as well. So that was one of these, like, mysteries that we had to wait and find out.
Yeah, till the literal end. So how do you feel about the way that this, we'll call it a hunter society, is set up, these ancient families?
I feel like they're ancient, and the way that it's set up is also ancient.
Very, like, traditional, quote-unquote, traditional roles.
Yeah, they only want a man to be the one to kill a god. There was a huge issue with Tidebringer was the name she dubbed herself. So a woman killed Poseidon. No.
Right.
Is it Poseidon?
Yeah.
Killed Poseidon. She dubbed herself Tidebringer. No one would work with her. She was alone.
Well, and she was also part of Lore's line.
Yeah.
So really, the only two people left in the line were Tidebringer and Lore.
Lore is the only mortal, and then the god.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just, I don't know. And then, like, we meet another, like, a friend of Lore's, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but, like, she should have been higher.
You're talking about Eero?
Yes, she should have been up higher in her family, but because she was a girl and her dad, that was his only heir, like, people just didn't even care about her. Just trying to fight the patriarchy, I guess.
Yeah, it was very much like the women are responsible for making children, and men are responsible for anything that requires brains.
And hunting, and So, but I guess it's, that was the way it was set up. It was these ancient families that had been around forever. And part of that design, which is what helped this book, is that it's hard to make changes in something that has been going on forever and ever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I feel like that was part of the point.
And yeah, that is a lot of a big part of the plot for sure, is trying to get people to see that they don't have to live that way, or trying to get people to see that. But another part of the plot of this book is the Aegis. It's a shield that was gifted to Lore's family, and this shield has the facade of Medusa on it, and like strikes fear in people, but the only people who can actually hold it are people from Lore's bloodline, because anybody else who tries to hold it is just like super heavy, and they just can't, they don't have the energy to sustain that, right? So we kind of get these flashbacks periodically throughout the book, and Lore keeps saying like, I don't have the Aegis, I don't know where it is. And we kind of get this sense that she's kind of an unreliable narrator. She's definitely not telling the whole truth, making us think that she has no idea why her entire family was killed.
Yeah.
When did you first get a sense that she actually knew the whole reason? She knows a lot more than she's telling them.
I can't like pinpoint the moment, but back to what you were saying, there was definitely this like level of, or this layer where like you start scratching away at it and you're like, we're missing something, she's not telling us something. But then it was like, does she not remember because it was such a traumatic event? This was what I was rationalizing. She doesn't remember anything because she walked in and saw her whole family murdered.
Yeah, maybe. Sometimes
but
your
then
brain is like, don't remember that.
Nope, shut that off. But then we start to realize like she is so strong. Her mental strength, she hid this because I think it was the only way for her to survive. Like, insane.
And kind of going back to the Aegis as well, people know that it's not where it's supposed to be, because the Cadmides, which are the Wrath's bloodline, the Cadmides were supposed to have it. They had stolen it at some point and had it held somewhere. But everybody knew that the Cadmides did not have the shield. So like the only other person who even cares about this shield enough to want to have it is Lore, because it's her heirloom. You know?
And she's the only one left that can use it.
Yeah, exactly. The only way anybody else can use it is if she voluntarily gives it to them, which is why it keeps getting brought up, because Athena is like, that is my property. That Aegis was mine. Zeus gave it to you, but it is mine. Give it back to me. And Lore's like, I don't know where it is. The whole time, basically the whole time. I don't know where it is, till we get to the big conflict, and then suddenly, let's go get the Aegis. I know exactly
knows where it is. Yeah. And I've known where it is this whole time. But also, she didn't really know who to trust either.
That's true.
So it was like, when can she give information? So I feel like we slowly start to see her building her family in Castor and Van and Miles, who was her human best friend.
Yeah. Miles plays a really big part in a lot of the background action.
Right. So to then realize that she has people she can trust is when things start to change.
Yeah. But that kind of then brings us to a couple of big twists that we see in this story. One of them, which I see as the more minor one, is that Gil is this man that she'd been living with. She was kind of his caretaker. He'd been paying her, he'd been letting her live in his house, and then he died. And then he basically left everything to her, all of his money, the house, everything. And eventually we come upon the new Dionysus. I cannot remember what his name was in this
I don't remember either.
book. Anyway, new Dionysus, apparently he and Hermes, they had this little relationship. All right. Turns out Gil was actually Hermes in disguise. And Hermes was protecting Lore from being found by the other gods who were a little bit more vengeful. I see that as a more minor
Reveler.
twist.
The Reveler.
Reveler. Revel. Whatever that even means. Reveler, I guess, in reference to the cultish activity of Dionysus kind of stuff. Yeah. The more... Were you surprised by the Gil being Hermes thing? Did you see that coming?
I didn't see it coming, but then when I learned about it, I was like, oh, I should have saw that coming. Like, who else would have protected Lore for this long? Like, there's no way she actually got out when everyone just wanted to wipe her off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was surprised. I'm disappointed that I was surprised. Like, I feel like I should have picked up on that, but I did not.
Especially because she was living in New York. Literally all the other families are living in New York. So truly, unless there is a God level intervention, how is she not being seen by anyone?
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of like you get to it and you're like, oh shit. And then you start thinking and you're like, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other twist.
This got me.
The bigger twist is Athena's betrayal. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so it ends up being this whole time, Lore thinks that Wrath murdered her family.
Mm-hmm.
It was Athena, and Athena has been playing her this whole time to get what she wants.
Which is the Aegis.
I was shocked. I thought that Athena, like at first I was like, ooh, I don't trust her yet. But so many things happened that I was like, I trust her. Like she's team Lore.
She's like a mentor. She's being like a figure for Lore. She's kind of mentoring her in this journey, which is what Athena does. She mentors warriors. Yeah. She guides warriors. But oh boy,
it really got me.
Did it pop off?
That really gutted me. I was really sad. I really was like, wow, this is a strong person for Lore to have in her corner. And yeah, I didn't see it coming. It was a big twist in the book and shocking.
Yeah, and I think that Athena even would have kept it going, but they eventually came across Tidebringer. They broke into like an underground layer of the Cadmides and found Tidebringer in a cell. And Athena like went back into the tunnel to do something, and Tidebringer was like, you can't trust her. Like she started telling her exactly why you cannot trust Athena, and Athena kills Tidebringer.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oops, should have seen that coming, honestly. Peace, you're all dead, is basically the gist of the conversation. And she beat Laura up half to death. Like Laura was gonna die in that sewer tunnel. But Castor found her. Actually, Miles found her because they were using like the Find My Friend on the phone. And Miles was like, I'm gonna find my friend, and they were able to find her, and Castor, because he's the new Apollo, healed her.
Healed Lore. Yeah.
Which was kind of a trend. Like, Lore would get super hurt, Castor would heal her. Oh, Lore's magically good again. Lore would go get into another fight and get really hurt, and then Castor would heal her, and oh, she's good again. On to the next fight.
I don't have an issue with that because that was the crew. That is literally Apollo's power, and Castor now had it. And in Castor's life before he became a god, he was training to be a healer. So I have no issue with utilizing the power that was part of their crew.
But then this brings in our big conflict, because after Athena's betrayal, that is the next big task, is figuring out how to stop Wrath. Yeah, he's found a more complete version of the poem that Zeus gave to the original hunters, and this complete version explains how the Aegon will end. And Wrath believes that he needs to make a big sacrifice of innocence. So, though a lot of Lore's motivation for going after Wrath is trying to avenge her family's death until she learns that Athena did it, she now has this secondary motivation. She has to stop his evil plans and not let a bunch of innocent New Yorkers die.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you feel about how this main conflict concluded? And I guess we should start by saying there was a super big fight. And there was some kind of fire involved, a fire that spreads through water. So it like had to be buried or something. Wrath was going to use this unstoppable fire, whatever it's called. Hellfire, sure. But somehow in this fight, Lore like convinces Athena to fight against Wrath. It was a little bit confusing to me how that happened.
This is kind of my only, not my only complaint, I'm sure there's other things I could think of, but this part felt a little messy to me. I felt like this was like the big conclusion and how it got concluded.
Rushed.
It did feel a little rushed. I felt like how Lore finally convinced Athena just didn't really add up with who we had found out Athena was.
Yeah.
It was a huge big fight scene, so it was action-packed, but it did feel a little anticlimactic, if I'm going to be honest. Like, this part, like, I don't know, something just didn't quite add up for this conclusion. But they did stop Wrath and saved all of New York, so that was a really positive thing.
Yeah. And they were able to defeat Wrath because I don't know what happened. I wish we had a little chapter from Athena so that we could see what was going on in her brain.
Yeah.
But somehow she like understood what she needed to do to be able to go back to Mount Olympus and be with all of her family. Like somehow she just knew that's what she needed to do. So of course Lore, again, super injured because that's what she does in fights. She gets injured. Like, again, she's gonna die. So Athena actually voluntarily gives her power to Lore. Like it just kind of goes Lore and hands her the blade and is like, you know what you need to do, aim for the heart.
Yeah, I just think that's the part that felt a little rushed. It's like they rewired all of Athena's brain, so now it made sense, even though they'd already tried to explain this to her once before.
Yeah, she was good, and then it was like she had ulterior motives, so now she's working with the bad guy, and suddenly she's willing to give up her power, when the whole time she was, like, not for that at all.
Yeah. That part felt a little rushed, as we said. Doesn't take away from how much I love the book, though.
Mm-hmm. But it does kind of turn out that that's what needs to happen. Like, the god has to willingly give up their power in order for them to be able to escape this.
And then they ascend
cycle.
And they can go back to where Zeus is and their home and all that.
Yeah. And I don't know if maybe Athena put it together with Apollo, because we mentioned that Apollo was talking to Castor, who was on his deathbed, and Apollo essentially said, look, like, kill me. And he ascended.
Yeah.
And now, at one point, was it Eero or was it Artemis who, quote unquote, killed Castor? But then he didn't die. Mm-hmm. He came back.
Yeah.
So people were like, all right, what the hell just happened here? Like, you're supposed to be dead, but you came back. So I don't know. Maybe those two things together is what helped Athena put it together. Yeah. But it still is kind of like a stretch for me.
Yeah. Agree.
But now there are no old gods left.
There are no old gods left, and now it's Castor and Lore are gods. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is the end. It's the 7th day. They're about to wake up, and then they will be fully gods, because the hunting period will be over.
And they don't really have, like, corporeal bodies outside of the Aegon, so they kind of just... who knows what they do.
Just float away. I'm not sure.
For 7 years.
Castor and Lore don't want these powers. They've never wanted these powers. Mm-mm. And they end up, like, praying the powers away. That was how it ends.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find... because it's right at the end.
So they wish to not have it. They don't want it. And they do this prayer. So Carrie's going to read this part, but the question is, how do we think the culture will adapt to life without this?
Okay, so here is the little section. It's right on the last page, so if you really don't like spoilers, skip ahead a couple seconds. But Please, Lore whispered, to the cloud bringer himself, to whoever might have been listening. Let us have a choice. Let it end. The air shifted around them as if in answer. She felt a charge, spreading in a wild dance across her senses. A presence gathered behind them, a wall of immense rumbling pressure. Zeus, maybe. She didn't turn around to face it, so who knows. Please, Lore whispered again, repeating the desperate prayer. Let us go. Release us. Wind rose, ruffling her hair. It sang an ancient song, carrying all that had been seen across land, seas, and centuries. She drew in a sharp breath as it passed through her, a sudden warmth that spread across her soul. Lore gripped Castor tighter, but there was no pain. There was only light beyond her closed eyelids. And then the power shimmering inside her pulled free from her body like an unraveling thread. So she prayed the power away.
Yeah.
And Zeus was like, all right, cool, I'll do this one thing. Cool. I'll be the good guy for a second.
Yeah. It's also a nice ending. I mean, they didn't want the power. With that power came being hunted and being, I mean, a loss of a lot of things that they wanted. And I think it was a nice way to end.
It was definitely like a conclusion. Like, I don't feel like there's more to the story. But then, kind of back to the question, how's the culture going to adapt to this? Because now there's no old gods. They're all dead or ascended. And now that Lore and Castor have prayed their powers away, there's not any new gods either.
To hunt. Yeah, I don't know how they'll survive, actually.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to adapt.
To what end, I'm not sure. Like, that's the entire foundation of who these people are. So I think there'll be a huge struggle.
But I do think that there are more people like Lore's parents. They wanted to get out of it. They were done.
Leave it. Yeah.
And like Eero's mother, who just disappeared one day and never wanted to be a part of it again, you know? There are people here that really hate this lifestyle, but they've been stuck in it because it's all they really know. And now that they truly cannot hunt gods anymore, those people are going to be the ones that will step up and take leadership roles and be really instrumental in helping everyone else adjust to life without the Aegon.
Yeah, I think that you're right. There'll be people that are relieved by it, and that'll, when there's a loss of power, there's a vacuum. So
yeah,
hopefully the good rises to the top, but then there might be some people that are really upset by it that then could do some harm. So I'm not quite sure how it all totally shake out, but yeah. All in all,
maybe we'll get a little novella eventually.
Yeah. I 5 out of 5. Already said it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. I liked it a lot.
So now, our next read.
You have no idea how excited I am about this. I have been trying to get Kayla to read this book for literally 2 years now.
Stop
and it took putting it on the list to get her to read it. And now she can't put it down.
I didn't have time, and this is the only way to make it work, but I think that we're all gonna benefit greatly from this because I'm pumped. Our next read is going to be A Court of Thorns and Roses by the Sarah J. Maas. So we're excited.
The original plan was just to read one.
Can't be done.
But if you're on our Instagram at all, you know that that's not going to happen. So
you can't just
we will be interrupting our regularly scheduled program for nothing but Sarah J. Maas. But that's a lie. We're going to do one more. Okay, we're also going to do A Court of Mist and Fury, arguably, to me, the best book in the series. Anyway. And then we're going to pick up with one of our most anticipated releases for this year. So we're not just going to be Sarah J. Maas for the rest of the year, all right? We'll give you some extra stuff, but we're obsessed.
I'm always excited about reading, but this is the most excited I've been in a while. Like, I feel it in my heart. Every book that we have scheduled now, I'm, like, amped to read.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Because there were a couple things on the list that we were both kind of like, we'll put it up here. Like, there's a show, so we'll read it, you know. We took it off.
No, now I'm in.
We're going to do Sarah J. Maas instead.
I'm so excited. So, everybody, I
so
hope you're
glad.
just as excited as we are, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation today. A book we really enjoyed. The next conversation I already know is going to be a book we really enjoyed, so hopefully that sparks a fire in you to get out there and find the books that make
Yes.
you as happy as these make us.
Yep.
And thank you
Find
so
a
much
book
for
that
listening.
you cannot put down.
Yeah. For this conversation, I guess leave us a lightning bolt in honor of Zeus or dishonor,
Sure.
whichever way you want to look at it. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll talk to you next time, and hugs and kisses from our home libraries.
Bye.
Bye.